Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Psychedelics Today. This is Joe Moore here with Kyle Buller. How you doing today, Kyle?
Doing well, Joe. How are you?
Doing great. Excited for another Solidarity Friday episode. Yep. This is going to be an interesting one. Very different from the others. And I'm excited about it because it's you and me sharing some stuff that we don't often get to share about. So
personal journeys.
Yeah, totally. So before we dig in, just a reminder to everybody that Navigating Psychedelics for Clinicians and Therapists is kicking off in January. Seats are selling pretty quickly. It probably will sell out. So if you want to be sure to be there, please buy soon. So we don't have a huge wait list. We've had huge wait lists in the past, and yeah, it's always kind of tough to tell somebody no, they can't. So if you want to get in soon. It's really great. CE approved in California, highly transferable to other states. So check it all out. psychedeliceducationcenter.com to learn more. And I think that's good. I want to talk about salvia first, Kyle.
Cool.
You've been going at it. You were able to buy some because it's legal in New Jersey. And what was the guy's name?
Surprising.
That you bought it from? Dan something? Siebert?
Yeah, Dan Siebert. He's I guess he's the OG in the salvia space. I think he was the first one to really kind of explore salvinorin A. I could be wrong about that, but yeah, he's been around for a while.
I think he might have been the first one to actually even isolate it.
Yeah. I think that might be true. I remember reading something along the lines of that, but I don't want to. Let me see if I can find it really quick.
This is the academic in you. I need a citation. No, but it's healthy. And it's interesting, right? Like, he's been around for a long time. He's got this site. It's like clearly not easy to order from. And it shows that he's not doing a tremendous amount of business because, if it's not easy to buy, it's, probably more significant for him as he wants to share it with people that actually care enough to put in the effort.
Yeah, which I think is important, right?
And from what I remember, Sage Wisdom is his site.
I believe so. Yeah,
Sage Wisdom. Yeah, and there's a lot of really interesting material on there. I think it's really helpful for people who are going to try it.
Yeah, I think it is like the resource for salvia, pretty much.
It's a complicated plant with a really complicated history. I think traditionally, Kyle, like in Oaxaca, did they use salvia when mushrooms were not in season?
Is that what you said?
I've heard that a number of times. I hope it's true. But I know in the Hamilton Morris episode, I think that's maybe where I heard it, his salvia episode.
Okay.
But, it's apocryphal things that are maybe meaningful are said all the time in these spaces. And it's hard to keep track, unfortunately. But it's got a long historical use in Oaxaca or in Mexico. And in the 90s, it became really big here. People found out about it in the States. And when YouTube came around, people loved
2000s.
filming themselves smoking salvia extract. So the way it was sold was not just pure leaf. You could buy pure leaf, but typically people were buying 5x, 10x, 20, 50x potency. So they actually do an extraction with ethanol or something and then put the active ingredient back on the leaf, and you could smoke it. You could put it in in between your jaw and your gum, or I don't even know. The hell do you call that? You put it in it's a dip packet or something. I don't know what that part of the mouth is called. So for a sublingual, buccal introduction.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you could get it introduced to your bloodstream in a more slow capacity versus smoked, which is an extreme spike. And people would do some really dumb shit on YouTube. I've seen people smoke it and then run out a window, totally blow their window off the door, off the wall, fall down. The one guy that was featured on Hamilton, he made a pretty big name for himself doing a lot of salvia videos. And he would do stuff like, let's smoke salvia in the garden. Let's try to plant this plant into the ground while high on salvia. It's well, good Lord. Clearly he just falls over, and, it's not a good look. And not too many people were using it skillfully for healing or exploration. Most people were just trying to get really high on it.
Yeah, it seemed like a shit show during those YouTube errors. I remember watching those videos and being like, what the hell is going on here? Which, I think ultimately kind of led to various states making it illegal to possess. I think on the federal level, Salvinorin A isn't scheduled, but it's state by state. I think
Correct.
I was reading that Florida is the only state that actually made Salvinorin A illegal,
Huh.
and most other states, the Salvinorin A might be legal, but double check everybody,
Right.
your state regulations. But most of them, I think, just ban the sale of the plant, the extract, and the concentrates.
Yeah. So, at times with good reason, because there is clearly to the public no obvious benefit here. And they had no idea that there were religious use cases, spiritual use cases elsewhere. This plant just seemed to come out of nowhere into America and just
Yeah.
like became a whole sensation. I only smoked it once in college, and it didn't really fly for me. I tried really hard, promise everybody, but it didn't fly for whatever reason.
It's weird. It's weird when you smoke it. My earlier years, when I was like 19 or 20, that was my first introduction to it. And yeah, it was a very strange experience. Felt like gravity was twisting and pulling. I felt like I was like, just being pushed in a lot of different directions. And obviously wasn't the best set and setting when you're young and dumb and exploring with friends. But never really piqued my interest to keep doing it. I was like, well, that was weird, and maybe I'll just kind of put that on the back seat and not really explore it again. So when salvia kept coming back up, I'm like,
I think it came back on my radar with Twig Harper like 4 years ago. I think you might have even pushed me in that direction to go, you see this?
Yeah, he was talking about like the tinctures and stuff like that, and working with it. Yeah, I saw him give a talk at I think it was like the first or second symposia event up in Amherst, Mass, and he was kind of talking about his whole process about working with salvia and starting to work with tinctures and making tinctures out of it. Really interesting.
Right, because most of the people that smoked it never really wanted to smoke it again.
Yeah.
And to find somebody that's like, no, I really like this and appreciate it. You're like, wait, what? That's fascinating. What's going on here? Because it just seemed like I couldn't come up with a good use case. And I had no idea at the time that there was this religious history, which to me carries a lot of weight. So maybe let's dig in, Kyle. Like what kind of stuff was coming up for you, or how was it?
It was really interesting, and obviously this was much different than how I was approaching it in my younger years. But it was oral tincture, and I tried a couple different times with different doses. So they're primarily low to moderate doses, and holding the tincture in my mouth for about 15 minutes or so, and kind of setting up a little ceremony and being really intentional with it. And the first couple times with like the low dose, it felt very like heart opening, kind of meditative, just like a little, almost kind of like a small dose of cannabis, but obviously a little bit different. It just felt just a little bit expansive. The moderate dose, more kind of in like that ceremonial context, it felt, it started to hit within like 15 minutes, felt, my body starting to go a little numb. Things were starting to expand. And I had actually a really profound experience. It felt very shamanic in the sense of, like the spirit of salvia kind of came into my view. And, it was a really interesting experience. And I thought it lasted a lot longer than what it was. I felt like I was in that space for like an hour or 2 hours, and looking at my watch, it was only like 25 minutes or 30 minutes or something like that, and I was just blown away by just the time distortion there. But for me, that moderate dose was it felt, I guess I would say, on that spiritual kind of shamanic type of experience, which I found to just be really fascinating, really interesting. And just having like a little bit of like, numbing sensation on the skin, on the body. And I was just thinking about like, oh, this is really interesting. I wonder if this has anything to do with the kappa opioid receptors. And, we know salvia has a much different mechanism of action. there. And so yeah, I found it to be a very interesting experience. I definitely want to kind of explore it a
Mm.
little bit more and to kind of understand it. I actually just recorded with Christopher Solomon maybe 2 weeks ago or so, and
It's the
about
guy that made the pipe.
yep, the salvia pipe. And so I recorded with him, and we chatted about the difference because he's still doing smoked salvia, but it's like kind of small microdoses of smoked salvia of the concentrate, the leaf, and he's using it in a different way, and he said he likes that because you can kind of titrate and go into it a little bit more versus kind of like the tincture holding in your mouth, letting it metabolize, and then maybe having to redose again. These small doses of smoked salvia really allow people to maybe do a little bit, work with it to some degree. But yeah, I mean, obviously, we know traditionally that it's chewed, taken orally, and I know some people said that the spirit of salvia doesn't like to be smoked or burned. The plant doesn't like to be burned. So, I was asking Chris about that as well, and he was saying, well, in some of the messages that I got, it was just saying, "Cool me down before you inhale me." So he kind of brings the water pipe into the use, so it's like cooling the smoke down before inhaling. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And it actually reminded me of like, I think I mentioned this on the podcast with him. It was like, your experience working with salvia and coming up with like a new process really kind of reminded me of Twig's process, because Twig was talking about like going into float tanks and, kind of getting these instructions on, how to work with the plant, which I find to be really fascinating.
Right. And you got the sense, so you got a couple messages, right? Like pretty much like don't be an asshole to me.
Yeah, just like
Paint
really
the plant.
respect the plants, right? Yeah. It was like, yeah, it was a really interesting like message of, wanting to get out there, but just be really respectful with plants. We want to be here to heal you and to show you things, but it's a relationship, right? And how do you respect that relationship? And, I had no intention on trying to explore any of that, but it was interesting that came up there.
Like, what do you think that means? Like, respect me.
Just like approaching it in a respectful way. If you were able to grow your own salvia, if you lived in a place like that, get to know the plant and just not to completely commodify it, I guess, in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
How could we develop a relationship with these plants in a different way? And I think, that's important.
There's these filmmakers that I've been trying to get in touch with for years. Salvia, the movie. And I think I think one person working on the film might have died maybe. And then I think they ran into some funding issues. So it really got slowed down. I would love to see that movie. And I think that's a great way to do it. I think Dan Siebert's probably doing similar stuff by not selling it like crazy. A big portion of it is education.
Yeah, and that's what it was, really educating people about the experience and just being really cautious and respectful in that sense. And, I was thinking about that. I'm like, oh, if this person wasn't providing this service, I wouldn't be able to have this experience. So really grateful for that. But, it also doesn't seem like he's trying to create a huge business out of it as well. It's really education focused and just kind of providing that service for folks that are curious. And I know he's kind of stepped away for a little bit in public, like talking about salvia and this and that, or that's what I've heard. Maybe that's what Peter Addy said. I thought I heard it on one of the podcasts or something like that. Forget.
His name was a big name for a while. He's just not been around. I think I remember in the Psychedelic Salon hearing from him here and there way back. Yeah, hopefully he comes back. Did you get a sense for what kinds of things salvia was trying to do or teach or anything other than respect me?
Yeah, that was it almost felt like it was the beginning of a relationship, right? So I think I would have to go back in there a little bit more to do some exploring.
Okay.
To kind of get some more of those insights. It felt like that was the first real introduction, and it was hey, this is who I am, and just really a lot of respect, I guess, kind of came in there. I was like, okay, this is interesting. Was it therapeutic in the sense of like I went in there trying to heal something. No, I went in there with a little bit of curiosity and seeing, what I could find. And that's just like kind of what appeared. But I
Mhm.
was not expecting that at all. I don't know what I was really expecting. I think I was thinking about like my experiences when I was like a lot younger. And it was going to be totally weird and strange and this and that. But, it did feel good. It like brought up energy, working with that stuff somatically, using breath to help kind of clear that out. So I found it to be, just a really kind of great medicine and very short. I think the whole thing was over within like 2 hours back to baseline. I mean, the peak experience felt like it only lasted like 30 minutes. And then, you kind of had the tapering down and chilling for like another hour and a half or so.
Mm. So you would try it again.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think folks would want to hear more. I want to hear more. It is not legal in Colorado to possess salvia divinorum, unfortunately. So it might take me a little bit to find a legal state and do some experiments. I think Arizona, New Mexico, Utah are all legal somehow, but not Colorado. So we'll figure it out.
Yeah, I'm surprised New Jersey's still legal. They were trying to pass a bill like back in the, mid 2000s. It just, I don't think ever really gained any traction and just stalled. But, who knows? Maybe if it starts to become a popular, substance and plant again, maybe, people get concerned, but who knows? Maybe not. Doesn't seem like a lot of people are actually exploring salvia. So I don't know if it's really that big of a deal.
I think word got out that it wasn't pleasant in the same way a lot of other drugs are.
Yeah.
Like people don't smoke salvia the same way they smoke cannabis.
No, not at all. No. Yeah. And, I think like those earlier times smoked like really kind of was like, I'll never do that again. That's just like strange and not very pleasant. So kind of doing it orally and kind of like these small titrated doses over, a few weeks and just trying to really figure out like what that feels like. It was a much, much different experience. And obviously approaching this work and all the years of breath work and, just self inner work, I think I approach this stuff just much differently than I was when I was 19, 20, 21, et cetera.
Cool. Anything else you want to say about salvia?
No, I just, it was a very interesting experience and excited to learn more about it. And yeah, just everybody stay tuned for that episode with Christopher Solomon. I don't know where that is in the backlog, but probably a few months after hearing this. But yeah, I mean, we got way into like his work, working with salvia somatically, why it is a good medicine for kind of somatic work. So yeah, if you're curious, we'll be releasing those episodes, or you can go back in our archive and check out the interview that you did with Peter Addy, Dr. Peter Addy.
Worth mentioning, you said it was a kappa opioid agonist, I guess. And like the really interesting thing is that I believe there's been reports that you can shut down a salvia experience using naloxone.
Oh, interesting.
I think that's the case. I've not tried it. I don't think there's been any real research on this. I'd be willing to be a test subject on that. So I guess I need to find naloxone first, which it's really inappropriate that I don't own naloxone currently, by the way. Everybody should have naloxone. But I'll report back if I ever get the chance to try it. And I think that's it. So let's jump to what I did on Friday.
Yeah, I want to hear all about this.
So my experience with ketamine in the past has been limited to surgical applications. So they'll use it in a blend with other anesthetic agents, and it's part of the cocktail that anesthesiologists like to use typically. So I've had it in 3 or 4 surgeries maybe so far. I've seen it used recreationally plenty. One person I know, like I saw him just lay on the ground for 2 hours at a concert in the middle of a festival. It seemed inappropriate and dangerous. I had a number of nurses watching him, and they were very worried about his pulse in the middle of a festival. And that was just really made me not necessarily like how some people use ketamine recreationally. I think if you have an intelligent relationship with ketamine, it's a different story. But this person just went for the moon. It's like, oh, this feels nice. I wonder what more feels like. It's like, okay, now you're laying down on the ground in the middle of a crowded festival. It's not really a good move. It's a weird drug, right? Like, are you going to really party with a dissociative anesthetic? Like, it depends on the dose. Dose makes the poison. Dose makes the medicine.
People like it though, right?
People love it. It's getting really big in the 20-something crowd.
Mm.
And I think people use it like there's no hangover. That's a big deal. You can just use a little bit and it can make you feel really nice. Some people really like that. And, you're not smoking something, so it's not like harshing your lungs or hurting your cells or anything like that. There is a addiction risk, so you got to be a little careful there. There's that risk around like crystals in the bladder of some kind. Like I think there's some sort of byproduct of metabolism of ketamine that can damage some people's bladders. It's a pretty low number of people, but
After
the real damage comes
it's like high doses, heavy use.
like daily. Yeah. Like a really awkward amount of ketamine on the regular. Anyway, I was invited to have an intermuscular ketamine injection into my deltoid. So right where they give you a flu shot in that area. And we went for about 1 milligram to kilogram. I'll disclose my weight, 86 milligrams. And it's a pretty heavy dose. Some people tell me they like 1.2 milligrams to kilogram. Some people even like to go as high as 2. I think 2 milligrams to kilogram is essentially like they could harvest all your organs and you wouldn't notice one bit.
Jeez.
Based on how high and disassociated I was, they probably could have done it to me. If they made it quick, like 5 minutes, probably would have been fine. So I had the full dissociative experience. I had a nice chair, some eye shades, whatever the Alex Gray ones are, Mindfold.
Mindfold, yeah.
Then,
I had no idea that he was behind that.
Pretty sure. Don't quote me on that. But that's what I've been saying for 10, 12 years now.
That's what I've heard too.
So I had that. I really wish I did more prep. I did a Sigur Rós on Spotify. They had a This Is Sigur Rós playlist, and I just did shuffle, which is totally not my style with like intentional sessions. Usually it's really programmed and deliberate.
They asked you to bring your music in, or they didn't have anything like pre-selected?
No. So I had my nice little, I don't know if I showed you these. I got the Bose QC35 wireless with the Psychedelics Today sticker on it. And it was like blast off, nothing. Like I didn't really feel anything for the first minute. So it gave me time to kind of settle in, which is nice. I was able to get a blanket on, had nice, pretty comfortable. No mask, which was kind of cool. And at a certain point, I just kind of like blacked out-ish. It was almost like falling asleep. And then consciousness kind of came back. And I want you to help me explore this one, Kyle, because I haven't had a chance to really debrief with anybody yet. But essentially, like a really small window of consciousness came back. There's nothing at all related to body. Oh, you know what? Backing up 1 minute. There was this really interesting experience of psychedelics today that came in, which is really kind of fun. So like you and me working together and like that being like a really interesting like crux in the situation, in the experience. And then I blacked out. Then something came in where it was like really primordial consciousness, maybe. Like the first thing I mentioned was it was like the first 2 worms to ever have an interaction. Like really primordial, like first cause type stuff. It was almost like a cartoon. So like there was depth and meaning, but like a lot of the edges were not there. Like a lot of the detail wasn't there. And it was like, I could tell that there was intention and will. Like there were entities trying to interact with each other. And like it was kind of interesting. It's like watching humans interact at a grocery store or like at a market, like, but without detail. Like I could feel the will and the intention, but it almost felt like empty because it lacks detail, therefore it's empty. So I'm like, what is happening here? And no anxiety the whole time, by the way. I was like, this is really just fucking fascinating. It's certainly not blissful like MDMA or LSD or something, but it's like, this is really fucking interesting. What is happening and what is this stuff that I'm experiencing? And the way I always framed it before going in was this is like an experience of consciousness, without identity, without ego, without anything really. And I didn't really feel like there was anything there that was me. Like the idea of Joe felt like a weird thing, weird, silly thing. There was just like I and ego and like one consciousness. So it wasn't like a Hindu like bliss consciousness thing. It was like me as an entity experiencing something.
Have you ever
like
experienced like an ego death on like say like psilocybin or anything like that? And how would you compare? I mean, it sounds like an ego death like experience, not having your sense of
I always
self
had problems
there.
with that term, Kyle.
Yeah, I think we both do.
Like, what the fuck are we talking about? Like, I don't feel like I'm dying. Like, I feel fucking horrible. But sometimes I feel really great. But like, yeah, I've not necessarily had that to the way people talk about it, where I am gone. Like, this sounds really, it feels really close to that. Like, there's no me left, but that experience of dying wasn't there. So it was like, yeah, it was kind of like an empty shadow bardo of some kind. That's kind of like the vibe I got a little bit. And then like things got a little more complex. I'm like, what on earth are people doing out there? Like, why? Like my whole experience is more about like the games we're playing in the world, and like why are we playing these games in the world? And like it's just a fucking goofy thing. And like there was a sense of, you know, dying near the end where it's like, all right, well, if I have to go, I have to go. It's fine. Like, this is, you know, it's just a project. And I had this like weird sense of like an ego being like, or like an experiencer being like an eternal thing. And like, it's nice that at least there's some things to bump into as opposed to just being out in empty void space for eternity.
Right.
Because that'd be boring as shit. But at least we got some things to like bump into and interact with. And I, you know, eventually like body sensations started coming back. Like I think my index finger was like, oh, I feel something. Oh, cool. Like that's nice. I'm told the peak was about 8 to 22 minutes. From minute 8 to minute 22 is about peak. So I thought that was interesting. And then eventually like I started being able to sense like in my mouth and then my toes. We didn't even talk about the music. The music was really interesting. If people don't know Sigur Rós, I really suggest you dig in a little bit to Sigur Rós. Sigurros, an Icelandic. I don't even know what to frame them as. Like kind of rock, kind of experimental, kind of post rock, and it's beautiful. I use it in breathwork all the time. Lenny does. Do you use it in breathwork?
Oh yeah. Some of those songs just bring out so much. There's just so much depth to the way that they play.
So hearing comes in first. You know, if you're in a coma, I guess you might be able to hear before you can do anything else. So I had hearing, but it was kind of like emotionless. It was like the music was actually the texture of the experience. You know, I could hear his voice and I like recognize the voice and I love the voice. I love the music, but the music wasn't really there more so than the voice. And some of it was like really, you know, creepy, spooky architecture, but not necessarily having that kind of emotional charge. Yeah. And then it just like slowly started like opening back up over the course of, I think it was about 44-minute experience from time of injection till I took the eye shades off.
Did you notice the music while you're in the peak experience, or did that kind of all faded away and you were somewhere else?
It was there a little bit. It was there a little bit, but not much, if I'm being honest. Yeah.
So more kind of started to come in to tune as you're starting to come back, it sounds like.
Right. Like I think it helped when I was peaking by adding like a little bit of sensory input. But yeah, I don't know that it was like contributing to the, I guess, visual experience, or I don't even know if visual is the right frame for that. It's just like a weird felt sense of something happening. Yeah. Like, you know, really detail poor, but there was meaning. There was consciousness and intention. It was like, yeah. Like what do chickens do when they're in a yard together? Like how do chickens interact? You know, like something like that. So, you know, I came out going, I was fascinating. And it's fascinating that ketamine is so cheap. I would do it again. Like I'm not in a real hurry. but I would absolutely try that again. And I can see why some people would get a little addicted to it.
Mm.
Yeah, I don't know if I told you this, but we're working on a piece, and this one really famous ketamine woman, pusher slash pioneer, I think in the '80s, that we're somewhat not associated with, familiar with. Stan just called her a ketamine addict. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, I think there was more there than that, Stan. Come on. And we should have a piece on this person, and hopefully, hopefully we can publish it in January. So y'all out there will learn more about this person. But she loved to do injections, which right now injections aren't like the most common application. I don't think. Like a lot of clinics really like the IV drip because they can really customize.
There's some clinics and people that work with it that I think sounds like they prefer a lot of IM. I know when Raquel has joined us in the class, it sounds like she likes IM as well.
Right. Yeah.
Because of multiple dosing and whatnot.
Yeah. Yeah. There's less infrastructure required. You can do it in rooms that can't legally support IV situations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And there's a lot of reasons to do IM over IV or lozenge. Lozenge, from what I was told, can't get you as deep.
Yeah, the bioavailability isn't that great with lozenges, and obviously it's going through what is that, secondary metabolism? So it's just taking longer to come on, and that whole experience probably lasts around like an hour and a half, 2 hours from come up to come down.
But it would be like a nice, relaxing, meditative situation, and at least you got the drug in you to do whatever it's doing biochemically. But yeah, like this experience is really just fascinating, like how rapidly my consciousness changed, and like it wasn't like a hurried, frenetic thing like DMT. It was like, oh no, you're just here, you're chilling, you're not going anywhere. Like it's they use the analogy of the well. You're at the bottom of like a well that's 10,000 kilometers deep. There's something there. It didn't really work as an analogy for me. It's more just like abstracted from the world, like taken somewhere else. Yeah. So overall, like I wish I could speak more highly of it, but because I don't have like acute depression or suicidality, I can't say like, oh, cool, that's gone now. Like a lot of the people we've talked to say is what happens. Like often the way I describe it is suicidality's gone in 2-3 hours. Depression's gone 2-3 hours, or maybe you have to sleep a night or two before that kicks in, but you get your life back for a few weeks.
Right.
Like I wish I could personally attest to that a little more, but realistically, not scary relative to ayahuasca or yeah. Like I didn't have anything scary going on. I was super calm the whole time, barely moved, and yeah, like I'm comfortable saying maybe you should try that. Not like it's gonna cure you, but go ahead.
Right. I guess what was one of your main takeaways there of the overall experience?
I was surprised I could walk as high as I did when I was on my way out. Didn't feel right. Didn't fall. Felt agile enough. The takeaway, there wasn't much. There's maybe the everyday world just has a lot more detail than these inner states, and the detail helps a lot. But yeah, really, I couldn't come up with anything that was super valuable in terms of a mushroom trip or ayahuasca or something.
Right.
Was there though? Yeah, nothing that I can really think of. Yeah. I wish I could say more, flesh it out in more detail. I hope the story's not coming off like a cartoonish, detail poor rendition of it. But, with all the projects that we've got going, Kyle, I was really freaked out to be going in there to do this. Typically, if I was this freaked out, I would probably just not use the drugs. But because it's not a tryptamine, it's not like a amphetamine. I'm like, okay, I think I'm good. Let's try it. I was able to link up with one of our mutual friends and try some EEG neurofeedback machines on the day before. So I think that helped calm down my nervous system. I stayed in a hotel close to location the night before, which is nice. And, yeah.
Sweet. I guess thinking about like all the different projects or like stress load, do you feel like it, maybe helped you kind of step away from that for a little bit, or even just kind of get some distance from that to be like, all right, maybe I don't need to think about this right now.
It gave me a reprieve. Yeah, totally. Like for the rest of the day, like my anxiety load was really low relative to what it normally is.
Mm,
It was like
yeah.
kind of baseline. Yeah. So yeah, I was super high in the car for like an hour on the ride home. And then like slowly in that second hour in the car, it was like near zero.
Mm,
I probably was acting a little goofy the whole time, but yeah, it was, I think there was a reprieve though. Like that idea of, okay, you get to like rest your neural circuitry for a little while and then let it come back on, in
yeah.
a day or two. Like I think there was something there. I tried my best to relax as much as I could over the weekend, which isn't usually possible for me,
Yeah.
but I did. And I think I feel really good this week as a result.
And did you have any
So maybe
like
there is that benefit.
yeah, did you have any like prep or integration with the person afterwards to like, kind of either set an intention going
A little
in
bit.
or
A
doing
little
any
bit.
work post?
No joint intention setting. A little bit of a debrief at the end, but it wasn't, because we weren't, it was more for me to just have the drug experience than to like get run through a process so I
Right.
can speak to the drug. Like you were saying about your salvia stuff, like thank God I had so much breathwork experience and fair amount of drug experience in the last 6-7 years. So it was like, oh yeah, I'm just high. This is fine. Like I wasn't too worried about it. I wasn't like concerned really. And I wasn't really trying to get at anything more than just understand the drug a little bit.
Mm,
It's kind of like the first
right.
date.
Yeah, yeah. That's how I felt with the salvia, like first date, see what's going on there. Well, actually, it was probably like the third, but first like medium dose to kind of go into that space a little bit deeper.
So from
I,
here, go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say I'm really curious about I am ketamine just because of some of the reports I've heard about how similar it is to like near death experiences, and I wonder
Yeah,
at some of
that
those
feels
higher
right.
doses, could a mystical experience foster any sort of deep insight or change from that? And I don't know, it'd just be interesting to kind of compare notes. My experience with like lozenges were really, I mean, obviously, it was more kind of like psycholytic because I was chatting. And, the one big takeaway for me with that was kind of getting away from ruminative thoughts for a bit. And a lot of coex themes started to come up. So I started seeing these different patterns of dreams I had within the past few years. And so, yeah, it was interesting to do it in that context where it was like paired with some sort of therapy. And, I could, see much more of the benefit. And I think that just brings up the point about, I guess, context and what Raquel Bennett talks about ketamine being a flexible tool in these different paradigms of use where, maybe it's a psychotherapy aspect or kind of like these shamanic aspects where it's like maybe higher doses and whatnot, or kind of just like the management type. Forget those paradigms, what she talks
Totally.
about, but
Guarantee if I did a lot of like spiritual work, like a lot of meditation on it, a lot of writing on it, or maybe had like a specific thing in mind that I spent like a few weeks digging into that I wanted to get in there, like I guarantee it would have been a different deal. Like, any kind of ritual or ceremony, like probably would have changed it. And I didn't really do anything like that. Yeah. So I'm really like totally on that NDE thing too, man. Like I would love to hear you report back after I would say for you, try to lobby for 1.2 plus milligrams to kilogram, just so it's like possibly more similar to your NDE. When someone told me they got 2 milligrams a kilogram, I'm like, what? Cool, but holy shit! Like, maybe I would be scared of it then when it's at that high of a dose. I don't know, but yeah, like I'm interested in this for a number of reasons. Like, of course, me being me. First thing is like, okay, how can I implement this safely, or should I implement this safely into like my celebratory use or whatever? And I'm like still on the fence. I'm like, like I might try it once or twice, but application, maybe I'd make some sort of really low concentration nasal spray.
Mm.
Really cheap to make. Like you could probably get a whole setup that lasts for a few weeks for like $5 or something, maybe 20. I don't know, but yeah, like I've been told mixing it in a recreational setting with MDMA makes for really, really, really lovely sensations. I'm not really prioritizing that at all, but it's on the back burner. I think, for a long flight, like you strapping in to go to like San Francisco from New York, like that could be a decent application. Like benzos are nice for flying, but obviously you want to minimize how often you have to use benzos. There's drugs that are much safer and much cheaper. Yeah. But, is it okay to have that much of a sedative while you're in a public situation?
Public.
Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a ethical
I've had
question.
Ambien when I'm flying. There's like barely any waking me up there. Like I think I slept from San Francisco all the way to Hong Kong just about,
Wow.
which was lovely. What was that? That was, yeah, I'm reckless though. That was like Ambien, Benadryl, and Xanax. Yeah, I probably could have died.
Jeez.
But I was not interested in being awake for that long flight. Don't try that at home, anybody. That's just what I did because I didn't want to. I had a big problem with flying for a whole day going to Asia. Yeah, not trying to be a role model. Don't do that. but I did it. And that was fine. But it was like, I didn't do it on the return flight.
Mm.
But yeah, like what drugs would make flying easier, less stressful? Flying's horrible most of the time.
I can never sleep on planes or anything like that.
Oh man, it's terrible.
Especially for a long flight like that. I always like wake up, I'm like, can't do it. Terrible.
Yeah. And I was flying a lot at that point in my life too. So I'm like, I know that this is going to be a nightmare. So just please put me out.
Yeah.
Anyway, like, yeah, what drugs would, there's so many different applications for drugs, right? Like, I guess, are we trying to go away from that term drugs? Like, I haven't really figured that out yet. Substances. But yeah, there's so many chemicals with so many different applications. And I don't think it's purely a therapeutic tool, right? It's an anesthetic. It's used in veterinary medicine too. Bothers me when everybody says it's a horse tranquilizer because it's sure they use it in veterinary medicine, but it's used plenty over on the human side as well.
When you said like your hearing came back online, I'm just thinking about like anesthetics. I remember it kind of flashed me back when I had my wisdom teeth pulled. And I just thought this was like a really interesting experience, just to think about consciousness and whatnot. But I woke up like towards the end and I could feel them pulling on my teeth. And it was like a total numb feeling of getting something pulled on. And I could also hear them like just, casual office jokes and, work banter. And I just thought, like, I remember having this thought of going, wow, this is so interesting. I'm awake in my body and I can't feel anything, but like I'm aware that there's external things going on outside of me. And it only lasted for like maybe like a minute before then my consciousness like turned off again. And then, they pulled me out once they were done operating. But that was like a really, really weird feeling to kind of like wake up, notice sound, and then notice like numbing sensations of them like pulling at my teeth. And I just remember sitting there laughing like internally and being like, wow, this is a really funny consciousness experience right now that I'm going through. And just, I don't know, it really fascinated me, like how our minds and bodies operate and how drugs, suppress certain things, and really fascinating. But I remember when they were giving me like anesthesia, I just kept seeing all these, and I'm not too sure what type of mixture they had, but I remember seeing all these bright lights and colors zoom at me. And I just wanted to like start laughing, telling him I was tripping balls, but I didn't think that was appropriate.
Man, you got a great dentist. I've never had any kind of visuals.
Forget what they gave me. It was like laughing. It was like laughing gas with, I forget what else they used, but I just remember some crazy bright visuals when they started giving me the anesthesia. And I was just like, oh my God, this is amazing.
Yeah. For mine, I was super high for like at least 3 hours after. I was definitely getting some IV stuff, but no idea. I wish I had the awareness to actually ask. It's really nice once you find out what drugs they've given you.
They told me, I just don't remember.
I've had fentanyl at least 4 times. All just surgery. It really freaks people out. But it's a nice way to challenge people's assumptions. Like everyone assumes fentanyl is the worst thing in the world. It is not. It's actually a really great drug. But yeah, like there's a lot going on there. Yeah, the coma, like people in comas, allegedly like hearing is one of the first things to come back, or
Hmm.
like the last things to go in people in comas.
Hmm.
So there's something there that's related.
Yeah, it's really fascinating.
You know, it's similar to like how smell and memory are super associated.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something with like awareness and hearing.
Mm.
It makes sense though, right? Like you're in bed. Like think about it in evolutionary biology terms. Like you're in bed and there might be a predator outside, and you start to
have
hear it.
like,
You're like, "Oh, wake up! Not good." And you know, I don't know if you've seen this or heard this one yet, but like when you're traveling and sleeping in a lot of different beds, your sleep is often a lot more shitty because you're not in your normal safe zone. Like
yeah,
after you
yeah, I
habituate to a
imagine
place
that.
and like, yeah. So, you know, there's something there. Like, but you know, what is that? Why is it that way? Like, I'm not saying I'm right. just the thought. Yeah. Well, okay. Anything else you want to talk about with ketamine?
No, it sounds like an interesting experience. Glad you're able to have that to kind of get an idea of what that's like. So, yeah, thanks for sharing
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, it was really neat. And more soon. Hopefully, I get some more drug experiences to share with everybody here. I imagine there will be more. So, let's talk about this new interesting molecule. What do they call it? TRG? I got the blog up.
TBG.
Yeah. So it's an ibogaine analog. I think you called it like tabernanth analoga or something like that.
Tabernanthalog. I could be
Tabernanthalog. Yeah, there it is. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like some chemists, this title here from Science Mag, chemists re-engineer psychedelic to treat depression and addiction in rats. And so they're looking at ibogaine, and I think they said here they came up with 20 different chemical analogs of the hallucinogen, retaining a central ring-shaped portion that proved to be involved with some of the desired effects, but losing other fragments that proved toxic and hallucinogenic. And the promising result was a compound called TBG, tabernanthalog. So, yeah, I always find it interesting when, you know, science says, you know, we're getting rid of some of these toxic or, you know, unpleasant hallucinogenic effects. But, you know, it also makes sense too if you're looking for some sort of like medical application that, you know, I don't know if it was in this article or another article exploring the same, you know, research saying like, you know, it'd be great to have like a very safe medication just as like Advil that you could take home and, you know, people aren't going to worry about, you know, these unpleasant psychedelic effects and, you know, needing more of those, you know, safety mechanisms. But I guess, you know, something that we always come back to, it's like, I definitely see the benefit for some of that. But then I guess when does it turn into just like another pharmaceutical drug where it's just, you know. But I guess we also have to check our own psychedelic bias and think about when is it not appropriate to constantly like have these psychedelic like effects when, you know, if there could be other chemicals out there that could, you know, bring benefit to somebody's life, why not explore that as well, right?
There's a lot of disorders out there. And like often when people are on one drug, they're on a lot of drugs.
Mm.
And yeah, like, is it if we could lower the cost of a treatment by 20 and maybe you have to do it 2 or 3 times longer, like that seems like a fair trade-off. Like the MAPS protocol is going to be very expensive. Psychedelic therapy is already very expensive. So if we could have a drug that would be safe for somebody to take at home alone, I think of course we should do that. Like,
Yeah.
you know, not everything is cured through the psychedelic experience, though a lot of things can be. It's not the case that everything needs to be.
Yeah.
One of the more interesting things I read here is that the researchers used a drug designing technique called function-oriented synthesis to identify which part of the ibogaine molecule induces structural changes in brain cells in laboratory cultures in animals.
Wow.
I I need to learn more about this function-oriented synthesis because this sounds like a really great way to speed drug development in general. Yeah, like there's some really interesting stuff here. Like why ibogaine is a really complicated molecule. I don't know if you've seen like the structure and
I
like
think it's like one of the most complicated, is what I've heard from like Hamilton and a few others, and just like, structurally beautiful and so complex.
yeah, I think Hamilton even used like the term like structurally alien at one
Yeah.
point. It's like this
Yeah.
is not like anything I've ever seen. I'm like, okay, that's a really interesting statement. So like they can now synthesize ibogaine in a lab, and as a result of that, they can now run like, the Sasha Shulgin game on it and like do a ton of modifications and hopefully do it in a more efficient manner than Sasha did. Though
Mhm.
though he did it in a pretty efficient way. But he didn't have these like modern techniques like function function oriented synthesis or whatever else
Mhm.
is going on there. So yeah, my hope my hope is that in like 20 years we've got like 500 new drugs based on all of these different psychedelic molecules. Tryptamines, phenethylamines, ibogaine derivatives, salvia derivatives. Like I'm hopeful that there's going to be a lot of really interesting stuff there.
Yeah.
And, the little there's a little spark in me that hopes that, stuff gets really kind of liberated too. Like you can manufacture all this stuff with E. coli bacteria that you manufactured at home to produce this stuff, you know? You don't need expensive lab gear. You can do a little bit of a CRISPR setup. And then now you're just like the same way people can homebrew beer, you're homebrewing all these new interesting molecules and the government can hopefully get out of it. Like for sure we need some consumer
I
protection.
wonder if
But
that will ever happen.
well, what we're seeing it with psilocybin, right? That group SciBio brought the psilocybin manufacturer down to, I forget, it like Compass numbers was like $2,000 a gram of psilocybin. And this is like $20 or like 20 cents a gram or something crazy like that. It was just like orders of magnitude lower in
Mm.
price. So, if you don't, and for GMP grade psilocybin. So I think we can do a lot with a lot of these things. Typically, they're copying the segments of genes that manufacture these molecules, but we're going to have these new synthetic things. So we're going to have to like understand the genetic relationship to the molecule that we're producing even better. Yeah. Like Mitch Gomez at one point was like, it's not that far off that this is going to happen with cocaine. And then like the whole cartel thing falls apart because people can just manufacture at home.
Right.
At least, the cocaine part of it. The rest of the drugs that they're pushing, it's a little more complicated. Like, heroin, that would be interesting. It'd certainly be a bummer, but it'd be interesting if the cartels and like gangs and intelligence agencies got out of that market. Yeah. So anyway, there's a lot of reasons why democratization is a benefit. Usually when there's a centralized authority, there's some negative consequences. So
Mhm.
anyway, that's enough on that rant. But anything else in this TBG?
They were saying a single injection of the compound protected against relapse of heroin use for up to 14 days. And this is in mice and rats. And it also doesn't appear to stimulate the brain's reward centers, as do drugs such as cocaine, indicating it may not cause dependency, which is really interesting. But what's this guy's name? David Olson, the researcher, also mentioned that TBG isn't particularly potent, as the animals had to be given large doses to see beneficial effects. And that can be a warning flag for potential medicines because drugs giving at larger doses often produce more side effects. So they're looking at creating a more potent version. And they conclude here, if they succeed, it could bring much needed help to sufferers of conditions that currently have limited medical treatments. But that's
Cool.
pretty impressive. I mean, just even thinking about like relapse, like just something that helps, combat against that. And how could you,
Big deal.
get into treatment, have something that helps to combat against relapse, and probably, I don't know if it's saying withdrawal too, because I'm sure that's pretty intense. But if it did also combat against withdrawal, that's huge for people that really want to get off some of these drugs.
Totally. Like that's the big sell for ibogaine, right? Like you get to kind of short circuit the chemical dependence feeling So you can actually just straight up deal with the addiction, as opposed to deal with withdrawals on in addition to the actual, substance use disorder situation. Another quote here
Yeah.
from the Science Alert article: with the exception of 18-MC, which is currently, they didn't write 18-MC, they wrote the full name, methoxyquinidine, 18-MC, which is currently in phase 2 clinical trials. Very few ibogaine analogs have demonstrated this level of safety while also producing therapeutic effects. So, like in animal models, this is looking really promising. And, they probably got to do a little bit more animal research, and then they can probably get it into humans. I wouldn't be surprised if we see this in a human trial in 2021. Yeah. People are really excited right now about this stuff. So I just imagine like there's going to be money behind it. They're going to really want to push. So happy to see it. Like we need more stuff to help with our, you know, multifaceted crisis we're going through right now.
Yep.
I can only imagine like once the pandemic is done, like how many people are going to be struggling with crippling disorders
Oh
from just like
man.
straight up depression to addiction to everything. Like it's going to be
How many people are already struggling
horrifying.
already, you know? Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Well, for whatever reason, I'm like, oh, I won't see it until this is over. But I'm like, oh no, this shit's going on right
Well,
now
yeah,
for sure.
It is interesting to think about the backlash or, kind of like long-term effects of, lockdown, isolation and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, we're all feeling it to some capacity, right? I think I was just chatting.
Rat Park.
Yeah, I was chatting with somebody, like just thinking about like how I really, I'm always like moving around, always like traveling, always like doing stuff and having to put all that on hold. There's a part of me, I'm like, who am I when I'm not able to just get in my car and go? And I'm like, just stuck here. It's, really challenges different parts of you when you can't like go about doing your own thing and your normal life.
Mm-hmm. I dealt with that with a lot of my injuries. It's like, who am I when I'm not like really aggressive, skier, snowboarder, biker, or climber, that kind of stuff? Who am I when I'm not weightlifting or like, not having these huge endorphin rushes, which is like a good placeholder for drug use, I guess. But yeah, like I'm really impressed with myself that I haven't like started drinking a ton or like smoking a ton or even like dipping into like LSD all the time, like I'm kind of proud of it, but I'm also like, should I be taking the edge off a little bit here and there? Probably the answer is yes, in moderation, but it's a hard thing to sort out. And yeah, everybody's losing their identity. It's kind of like a collective ego death in some ways, to use a problematic term.
Who am I when I don't have the things that make me around or be able to do the things that make me? Yeah, it's something to think about. And then what does that look like after, or is some of those like psychological fears still going to be there for some folks, being immunocompromised has definitely took it like a heightened sensitivity to a lot of this stuff, like trying to be extra, extra careful. Before I was like, didn't really like, I thought about it, but like now I'm just like, woo, like that's now embedded in my mind about like being extra cautious around things.
Yeah. So I guess a quick teaser before we wrap here. I would say in 2-3 more weeks, I'll be reporting back on my first batch of microdose sessions. And I took last week off because I didn't want to get more amplified going into the ketamine situation. But yeah, it's interesting. Like I don't know that my dosing is perfect yet, but yeah, kudos to the people that are checking it out. It's really interesting to do it with LSD versus like mushrooms. LSD just seems a lot easier to do it with. The volumetric method with like water and like measuring out a certain number of milliliters, like that just seems a lot more sensible than like, not sensible, easier. That's the right word. Than weighing everything out in like 0.1, 0.2 grams for every pill or whatever you're doing. Yeah. But if you've got a machine, there's people out there. I don't know if I told you this. People out there with like really fancy machines that you can just like dump in your powder and it just like does it at a perfect dosage.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess let's wrap. Could you mention some things about our upcoming class in January?
Yeah, so navigating psychedelics for clinicians and therapists. You can check that out at psychedeliciceducationcenter.com. Classes start January 7th. We have two groups. Group 1 is at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, and Group 2 is at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. It's a hybrid course, so you'll get tons of online material that you'll be able to work throughout the 8 weeks, and beyond, you'll get lifetime access to that material and special interviews and, our trip journal or integration workbook and just tons of resources. And we'll meet online for an hour and a half each class time and, use it as an open classroom session to really dig into the nuances and chat about, this stuff in depth with you. So, if you want to join us, you want to, cultivate your psychedelic education, learn more. We love to have you. So check that out at psychedeliciceducationcenter.com.
Fantastic. Thank you all for checking out this episode. If you don't want to check out our class, but still want to help us out, tell a friend, maybe share it around on social. And yeah, we'll see you on the next episode in just a few more days. Have a good one, everybody. Take care.
Take care.